Destructive winds, deadly tidal surges, killer tornadoes, flash floods, and pouring rain are all signatures of a hurricane. 2004 had been the most costly and destructive hurricane season on record. But then came the Atlantic hurricane season of 2005. It shattered many long-standing records and totally eclipsed the season of 2004. The most ever named storms, 27 in all. The most hurricanes in a season. The most Category 5 storms. The strongest recorded storm. And the costliest hurricane in U.S. history with Katrina. The landfall of 4 major hurricanes in the U.S. also set a new record. Even more disturbing, the experts predict that we could see this heightened hurricane activity continue for 20 to 40 more years. There is, however, good news.
This is by far the most amazing thing that I've ever seen.
2 weeks ago, Wilma hit us from the west side. We suffered no damage with the exception of a few loose screen panels.
I couldn't believe it. I had to see it because I've never seen anything like this before, and I hope I never do again.
Not one Deltec home has ever been destroyed with a storm.
The house next door, they're not even back in their house yet, and that was from after Gene, which is over a year.
There is nothing more than concrete pillars left of any house around here.
Ivan was a pretty difficult event, and when it came ashore, I believe it was a strong 3 or a weak 4. The eye of the hurricane, Ivan, passed directly over my house.
I didn't evacuate. I stayed the whole time. I was one of the few in this neighborhood who did not evacuate.
Charlie, Francis, Ivan, Gene, Wilma. There were a couple of tropical storms, but they don't count.
This is overwhelming, huh?
It is. It's just amazing to think that this was all under
I
so
know.
much water.
Everybody has a story.
I felt like the wind couldn't hold a wall, and I felt that's what made the house stronger than any other normal house. Our neighbors down the road had their whole side of the house blown in.
The Grand Casino landed in the middle of the street in Gulfport. Some of them were million-dollar houses, and there's nothing left to them. They're just completely devastated. Look at the clothing in the trees and everything.
So is it a refrigerator in there?
That's a refrigerator in a tree. Now this one flew. I don't know where from. It landed there though. I don't know where that house came from.
Ivan was basically a combination of wind and water. Hurricanes have a life of their own. Some are wind events, some are water events, and some a combination. Ivan was a combination, but primarily was water.
Well, it got pretty hairy. We had probably hurricane-force winds with Katrina and real high tides that come up in the yard. We've had probably 3.5 foot seas in a little creek that we live on. One tree went down over here, and what was left of Ivan just about went when Katrina come through, so it wasn't near as bad as Ivan, but it still got pretty hairy.
But the house never moved. We never felt anything. Just heard the wind.
Some of our friends' houses that have been here for 70, 80 years are completely nothing left, gone.
Like, TV does not do justice to the devastation that has happened here.
You came in, you saw a lot of devastation and all, but you've just seen some of the lesser damaged places than we have. Some are completely gone. There's no businesses left. Most of the homes are gone. But everybody says we'll rebuild it. It was probably the best place on earth to live.
I mean, this was a beautiful subdivision. It really was. I wish you could have seen it before all this destruction.
Reinforced concrete, our entryway, and we made it this way because of the possibility of a flood. You know, we built it above the 14-foot flood level, but this time was worse than ever. This is the watermark of how much water we had on the floor here of the home. We built the home so we can live on this floor entirely, and the guest rooms are all upstairs. It was a gigantic hurricane coming through the Gulf, and we were on the northeast side of it, which is always the worst, and it was pushing a 29-foot surge, wave surge in front of it. And the wave came ashore, and then the wind hammered the coast for approximately 12 hours before it let up any. The wind was supposedly came ashore right here at 145 miles an hour, with tornadoes spinning out up to 200.
This is actually where the hurricane hit. They had a lot of problems in New Orleans because the
Flooding.
levees broke. But if it hadn't been for the levees, New Orleans wouldn't have any damage because all the storm hit here. The winds hit here.
As you can see, the home structurally is pretty much intact inside. Not much wind damage, but everything was hurt by the rising water or the wind-blown water. All the windows held satisfactorily. Some of them got leakage from the water being elevated, but none of them got blown out or broken at all.
The only damage that we had was from Ivan, and it was just a few shingles off the roof. That was it. Everything else was perfect. No damage for Katrina and no damage for Rita.
Now, the only damage that we sustained was we had 2 pieces of our exterior railing around the deck, but that was the only damage.
The noise that hurricanes make, I don't care what shape your house is, it is a little spooky to stay in a house during a hurricane. And probably the reason that we started staying here during the hurricanes is that the city officials don't let us back on this island for 2 or 3 days, even though you may have had no damage, which we have not had. And now we know how strong this house is, I wouldn't give it a second thought.
They hadn't even moved in their brand new house, and all the windows blew out of it.
After Ivan, which was our major hurricane, and Rita, we had branches down during Rita also. When we could get here, and we live within walking distance, when we could get here, we walked in and there was not even condensation in the skylights. This building was so tight and so dry.
No seam ruptures, nothing at all on up here.
We had Francis, Ivan, and Jean. And this year we had Wilma. Jean was definitely the worst.
Hurricane Jean last September came through here, and this Deltec home stood up like Fort Knox. We lost 2 shingles on the roof. That was our damage. And our neighbors next door lost their houses, and they lost the living ability on the other side of us, and we had no damage at all. It was amazing.
We have confidence in the house.
Every house on that area is completely gone. Even the beautiful brand new houses. This was all houses. But these houses were brand new on the side over here. Those 2 hasn't even, the people haven't even sold it yet. It was for sale. And these people moved in here just not even a year ago. The same for these people.
I had off the bay, not out of the Gulf, but off the bay, approximately 10 feet of water under this house.
We had things that were in a kitchen and up in here. Floated all around here, all around this way until we came in here.
I have passed out more Deltec literature and shown our little scrapbook of from where we started putting up the first home to where we've had our first Tuesday night jam in here, which was New Year's Eve. And everyone that comes through has gone, wow, this is incredible. Deltec has a product that has really piqued the interest of everyone in this area being in such a hurricane-prone belt.
I think a house should be like a gem in a setting. I don't like a house that takes up the whole lot. It gives me a view of the river, and it also gives me a view into my backyard and the large trees back there. It was something I could build myself, and it has also been extremely wind resistant the last 2 years during the hurricanes we've had. And I think it's just a very pleasing shape for a house.
We like just everything about our Deltec home. We like the roominess, the design that you can do yourself indoors, the roof design, the overhang. We just like the decks. We just like it all.
The main reason I have a Deltec is because I just like the way it looks, and freedom from worrying about destruction during winds seems to be an increasingly important factor in lifestyle. But if I didn't like the way it looked, I wouldn't have gotten it. I did several customizing features on my home to make it the way I wanted to live. I built a fireplace on the inside, and I covered it with the local rock that was dug out of the ground here. On the outside, I covered the chimney with coquina, and also there's a fireplace on the outside that's actually a barbecue pit. I have the certain knowledge of exactly the way that house is built and what it is, and that's worth something to me anyway.
So we planned this particular one with glass all on this side so we could face the ocean. And when we're in our living room or our dining room or the family room, we have a 180-degree glass wall.
We're extremely happy with our decision to put a metal roof on.
I like the way it looks in the neighborhood. I really do. It adds something different to the regular square house neighborhood.
When I built this house, I didn't want any carpet in it because carpet molds, it's hard to clean, dogs mess it up, and I just don't like it. So I wanted to have ceramic floor in here. There's a rectangular section off the circle of the typical Deltec that's a stairwell, and that is an entryway onto the house, and it also made it possible to put a generous stairway in there. There's a bay window on the front. The original purpose was to give the dogs a place to sit and look out, but as it turns out, it gives a great view from the kitchen area where, when you're cooking or working in the kitchen, to see down the road that the house is on and to the river.
Everything. We like everything about it. We like the different shape of the house, the different things that you can do inside with the rooms. We like not being a cookie cutter house on the outside.
And as you can see, we use our home, our Deltec home, as a retail place, retail music store. The back room right over there is what we call, that's where the big boys hang out. We have got collectible guitars everywhere, from guitars that have been signed by Willie Nelson to Merle Haggard's old guitars, Elvis Presley guitars. And we are so secure, as I said before, in our Deltec home that we just took the ones that were on an outside wall and put them in cases. Everybody else we left out because we knew that this home was very, very well built and able to withstand.
Oh, I love the Deltec home. It's just so different, and I just feel that it's the kind of place that we can live on the beach and feel very natural.
While it was being built 19 years ago, one of the neighbors from across the street came over and said, you know, I think I'm going to put one of those up in the mountains where I have a lot.
My wife actually designed the interior of the house. As you probably know, there are no weight-bearing walls inside a Deltec home. All the weight shifted to the outside.
Hurricane Charlie, the eye passed about 30 miles west of here. We had hurricane storm force winds for about 2 hours. That was the beginning of last year, which is a season that would be best forgotten. About 2 weeks later, Hurricane Francis came through. We had hurricane and tropical storm force winds for the better part of 3 days. A month later, at the end of September, Hurricane Jean went in south of us again, nearly the same spot, and we went through at least another 2 days of tropical storm and hurricane force winds. We probably had 90-mile-an-hour winds here for several hours during the worst of the storm. This house did just fine.
And we stayed in our house in Andrew in Miami, and we were in a closet there. Here we really didn't have that feeling.
Since we've owned our house, we've had 3 major hurricanes that hit us within 13 months.
Staying in the Deltec during the storm was much different than the experience that our neighbors had who live all around us. It was scary. It was a real experience to watch tree trunks and limbs blowing through the air sideways. But in the Deltec, we didn't hear the roaring sound that our neighbors did.
Hurricane Wilma, we weren't supposed to get much wind out of it, but we had about 2 hours of minimal hurricane force winds from the north, the opposite direction from last year. It was a surprise to get that strong a wind, but once again, all I did was put up shutters and was sitting working in the house and watched the trees and all the other vegetation around here being shaken to the ground, but the house didn't move, and that was very reassuring.
It's probably the most over-engineered house I've ever lived in or purchased, and I have moved 18 times in my career. I would definitely do this house again if I were to move again. I would strongly recommend it to anybody who lives in a wind-prone area.
I think the way that it's built should be easier to live in after a hurricane. Being in a Deltec home, at least this one, was very different. This house didn't make much noise. Inside it was extremely quiet. The only source of sound was the flue was like a pipe organ, and there was a lot of sounds, noise, a deep sort of a tone coming down into the house from that. But there was surprisingly very little movement or heaving or creaking of the house.
We don't evacuate. We stay here. When you have this many pretty guitars, you don't evacuate. But we felt so secure in our Deltec home that we spent the hurricane in our home and left all of our guitars and mandolins and banjos and basses, and we knew that they would be secure in our Deltec home.
No, we stayed here in the house during the storm. It wasn't 100% our choice, but because the storm grew so quickly and changed course so quickly, we had no choice. So we stayed here in the house.
I helped put up hurricane shutters on 7 different houses.
The worst hurricane we thought was our first one, which was Francis, that actually came and stalled overnight here for a good 8 hours. And it was just very scary sounding. But with the unique design of the house, I could hear that the wind was just whipping around the house and not actually holding a wall, and it made me feel more confident in the house.
Francis, the first one, was the worst because the first strong storm that I was going through in the house, and we knew it was going to be bad. And I decided that I was going to stay in the house. I joked with my friends who thought I was crazy by telling them that I used the Roman strategy of quality control. When Romans built their arches of stone, they put the mason underneath the arch when the scaffolding was withdrawn. If the arch was to fail, the architect and stonemason would be the first to go. So I felt like if I stayed in the house and I made a mistake, I'd be the first to know. As it was, I'm still here.
But when Katrina especially came through, we had easily 100 to 135 mile-an-hour winds, what we call around here sideways rain. Sideways rain. So this building has yet to leak anywhere. So we have a healthy respect for Mother Nature. So our selection of Deltec and the hurricane, as well as the economy of the package, was definitely a deciding factor in our choice.
There was no problem with taking the basic Deltec home design, the home kit, and adding the extra strapping and clips.
We were quite afraid with the power lines and the transformers outside sparking and blowing up. It sounded like bombs were going off. And with the wind and the way it was blowing, it's absolutely horrifying. I mean, scared to death. But we managed really well, and our home held up excellent.
It was really scary.
Yes, this is the place to be in a really severe hurricane.
Like a lot of things about it, the biggest single thing without a doubt is the fact that it went through Hurricane Charlie and all of the other ones, and we didn't have to move out and get destroyed like all of our neighbors.
Even the insurance adjuster that looked at it was amazed. She couldn't hardly believe it. And she said she's seen a lot of houses in her time, but she never saw one stand like this.
Aaron,
Aaron. It
Aaron.
was Aaron. I think it hit probably about
94.
94. And our friends came over. They have waterfront property, so they had to evacuate their house, so they stayed here on the down level. And we were upstairs. And the wind was scary. It was very scary sounding. But the funny thing about it is, with those guys staying downstairs, they said they really didn't hear much wind at all, and they were slept all through the night. And hearing on the radio, you know, you need to get down to the first level if you live in a two-story home. Well, my friends were downstairs, sound asleep, and I felt we were comfortable in our house, and I knew it wasn't to that point. So we decided just to stay upstairs, and everything was just fine.
And we never boarded up.
And we never boarded up.
And this building has been through Barry, Ivan, which was our Category 5, that the eye came right over this building. And then, of course, this year we've been through Arlene, Dennis, we've been through Georges, which was in 2002, and that was a good strong 3, borderline 4. And then, of course, this year, Rita, Katrina. Dennis was prior to that. Dennis dumped a whole lot of rain on us, and then came Miss Rita with her calling card.
We didn't hear roaring. Our house didn't shake and shudder like we have been told by our neighbors their houses did. So it was very scary at the time, but we felt very secure in it. And today, after having gone through that, and then the subsequent storms since it, we have 100% confidence in the house.
I live in a house that I feel very safe in. If it were not for my wife's fears, I would probably ride out anything up to a minimum Category 3. Above that, I'm going to run as well. But a Category 1 or a Category 2 or a small 3, I would feel very comfortable riding it out in this house, particularly based on the fact that I have had no damage in 3 direct hits.
There was no damage after any of the storms, except that the soffit had moved about 1/4 of an inch in 2 or 3 places and on the outside, which was nothing. And when I think of over in my sister's neighborhood in East Orlando, where all the soffit was blown out of the houses, everybody else had shingles flying off their roofs, and I would come out and find pieces of other people's houses or their boats here in my front yard. So no, there was no damage at all.
Having gone through 3 hurricanes, which were basically direct hits, Ivan, Katrina, and Dennis, I've missed maybe 8 or 10 shingles off a ridge cap on one side of my house, and that's the only damage I've had.
The damage was all outside, you know, yard, fences. We lost a few shingles, and that was about it.
People on the Gulf Coast, I highly recommend Deltec and get it up off the ground. The Deltec flooring system will keep you safe.
The roof, it emphasizes the symmetry, the consistent symmetry of the house, but it's stood all the wind. It's supposedly good for 160-mile-an-hour winds, and it hasn't shown any movement, any bending or anything. Most of the damage to homes, at least in this area, was to roofs, and this roof has been up to my expectations and then some.
We've owned our Deltec home 19 years, and it has just been moved to this spot where it was 2 lots up earlier. We traded lots with the person that owned this lot. There was a house on this lot. They moved that house down the street and moved our house over here.
That was a story. The Tuesday before Charlie hit on Friday the 13th, they were tying down the hurricane ties. So thank God they got those ties all connected before Charlie hit.
So once they bolted those in, they called us and said, it's secure, and it was.
We're talking in 4 hurricanes, we have lost 15 shingles.
Yes, definitely. We definitely approached it with the hurricane reputation in mind.
Our Deltec home was built in 1982, so it's approximately 24 years old now. There was no extra damage to the house. We've had 2 other major hurricanes that have hit this house, and no other damage has happened with the exception of the first hurricane, which ripped up some of our old roof shingle, which our roof needed to be replaced anyway.
There was sure a lot of trash, pieces of boats, some parts of roofs of houses, and trees down everywhere, power lines down, no power. We definitely were business as usual was not going to occur for a while afterwards.
And I think actually that house stood so well because this house broke the wind when it was coming around.
There was no water intrusion at all, and I don't mean just from rising water, from water from the roof, from anything. And not sure, but I think that we might be the only watertight home on the beach here.
30 years ago, we first saw them down in Panacea, and they're still standing. They've never lost a roof.
Some places more damage. We didn't, but some places. We had a few shingles off.
With Charlie.
With Charlie.
And one piece of flashing.
Yeah.
The windows held up beautifully. We had no leakage. We had no problem.
I actually went online searching for wind-resistive housing and found Deltec and made some inquiries and actually visited the factory 3 different times before making the purchase.
That house was wiped out totally because the roof system failed on that house. And our next door neighbor on the other side, that's a total loss on that side. On this side, they had extensive damage upstairs due to structural failure of the roof. It's a regular house with regular eaves, and it just wasn't built like this one.
One of the reasons that I chose the Deltec design, and the Deltec in particular, was because of wind resistance.
The wind came in at 145 miles an hour and sustained for approximately 12 hours. And then this is all the damage you see. It's a little bit of fascia board missing and some of the shingles from the roof.
The way the design and the structure that people don't see, like the steel ring at the top and so forth and so on that holds all this together, was way ahead of its time, and is the reason today, I believe, that it's so strong.
The energy efficiency is excellent.
One of the reasons I really loved about the Deltec home is there's a lot of privacy inside the house.
We have just recently purchased another piece of building property right up the river. If we do build a house, there's just no question about it, it'll be a Deltec, hands down.
And we wanted something that you weren't throwing away half your materials, how everything just fit perfectly.
What really impressed me was the wide soffits on the house, and the wide soffits keep the elements of the regular weather, like for instance rain and sun, and I find that the wide soffits protects the siding of the house a lot more than your standard house would.
Deltec's real direct in their instructions, and it was so easy to get it done.
Because I'm an engineer, and I looked at construction when we first looked at them up in Asheville, and it was fabulous.
Versatility of the design people at Deltec to help you put it together is absolutely phenomenal. I like the capability of designing the interior the way that you want it, as opposed to the way maybe the design would force you to go with it.
We didn't have any spare parts left over. Everything was fine. They furnished us with everything we needed.
These people at Deltec were incredible, is all I can tell you. Even years after we had a small problem with our windows being here on the beach, they helped us out 100%. We got new gaskets for the windows and everything, that our general contractor had no problem with the house. I mean, it was there, and all he did was trim it out and finish the interior, and that was the best part of the whole thing. It's really well planned.
My husband's son was a carpenter, and he had never done a Deltec. So he could read the floor plans, and every time he came across a question, something he didn't understand, he called the 800 number with Deltec, and they walked him through it. And there was quite a few times he called, but we were really impressed with the results.
Part of the fun of the process was being able to sit there and kind of lay out and play with where your furniture was going to fit. With the fact that the walls inside can be anywhere you want them to be, since they don't hold the roof up, it gives you 100% latitude on how you want to design the rooms, as big or small as you want them. So that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that part.
But I would like also to put in a little plug for the people at Deltec. They have just been great. on this edition, for example, they've just helped us so much in making sure we got it right and so forth and so on. So they deserve some credit. They're good people to work with.
If we ever, heaven forbid, build another home, it will be Deltec. You can't beat it for safety, economy, and flexibility.
We're just glad that we bought a Deltec.
The people at Deltec are extremely pleasurable to deal with.
We can put a wall anywhere we want to. It's very, very flexible as to floor design. Our utilities in our Deltec structure, as opposed to where we were, which was a concrete block, is about as third less than it was in a conventional home.
We'd promote it to anybody.
We love it.
We ordered it from Deltec, of course, and they had it up in a weekend. You could do anything you want on the inside, anything.
The neighbors who lived with us, one of the very first things that the wife said when they crawled out of the rubble of their house was, next house we build is going to be a Deltec.
I would like to see everyone who lives here build a Deltec home, and that way during a hurricane season they could feel secure, and maybe when they would come back to their house they would find it in such good order like we did.
Never.
I don't think we'll ever trade a Deltec for anything else again, no.
Deltec has really got a superb product. It's the only way to put it.
The best thing I can say is I would definitely do it again.
My husband made the right decision when he bought this house.
Well, it's devastating, you know? But you know, in comparison to the danger, when you thought your friends might have never made it through the hurricane, that's the most important thing, is human life, you know? To think that somebody you loved could be dead. And then you find everybody you see, you hug them, and you kiss them, and it gives you an appreciation of life, a more deep appreciation of life.